Welcome to Catholics Coast to Coast. I'm Ace McKay, always loving what's happening at Podcast Central, which is why we have each and every week a chance to really see and hear what it is that people are talking about to deepen their faith, to build community, and to know through this Easter season, we are not alone. And so I love it as we celebrate a risen Savior. We're going to dive into our podcast this week. But before we do so, remember, Podcast Central, EWTN.com/podcast can get you all of these shows and more. And while we're at it, we love to dive into the readings for this week's Mass. So let's check in with your word on the Word.
Did you know Amanda was in town last week?
Wait, no. How do you know that?
We had lunch together. She didn't tell you?
She always tells me when she comes to town. Are you sure it was last week?
Pretty sure.
Okay.
But someone sounds like a doubting Thomas.
Hi, I'm Veronica, and this is Melissa. Welcome back to the Word on the Word. This weekend, we celebrate Divine Mercy Sunday, so we're going to take a look at the Gospel.
It comes from John, and he tells how Jesus appeared to his disciples right after his death. The disciples were overjoyed to see him. Jesus breathed on them and gave them the grace to forgive sins, which is a foreshadowing of Pentecost.
Someone missed out on all of this excitement, Thomas. His friends told him what had happened, but he wanted to see Jesus for himself. And a week later, Jesus appeared again.
This time, Thomas was present, and he confessed his belief in Jesus. Jesus told him, "Blessed are those who have not seen and have believed." Keeping a consistent faith can be difficult sometimes, and I like to reflect on this verse any time that the things I see aren't going the way I believe they should.
Right. God has everything in control. He can see the full picture, and we can only see so much. Seeing and believing is one thing, but there's something so much deeper to being able to believe when you haven't seen something.
Veronica mentioned earlier that this Sunday is Divine Mercy Sunday, so we challenge you this week to pray the Chapel of Divine Mercy. We'll attach a few links below to help you out. Jesus is always ready to forgive us. We just have to be humble enough to ask for it.
And don't forget to catch us next week here on EWTN.
Bye.
Bye.
Easter reflections, and always continuing our jubilant year as you check out year C of Word on the Word. All you have to do is go to EWTN.com/podcast or subscribe wherever you like to stream. While we head into our first podcast for the week, the Be-DAD-itudes we featured last week. This week it's the Be-DAD-itudes as Dr. Greg Popcek explores the second practice in the Rite of Reaching Out and explores what the role of us as dads is playing as we encourage not only generous service, but also Christian discipline in the home. So let's dive into the Be-DAD-itudes with this week's Catholics Coast to Coast.
Hi, and welcome to the Be-DAD-itudes podcast, episode 39. And in this episode, we're looking at the second practice in the third rite of reaching out, which is the rite that focuses on us living out the royal mission of baptism. We've been going through the liturgy of domestic church life, and we talked about the practices associated with the rite of Christian relationship, which involves teaching us how we can live Christ's sacrificial love in our home and exercise our common priesthood to consecrate daily life to Christ and turn our homes into little ways of holiness. And then we took a look at the rite of family rituals, which enables us to live out our prophetic mission of baptism by modeling Christian attitudes toward all the stuff human beings do all day long, working, playing, talking, and praying, so that we can form Christian disciples in our home and exercise that prophetic mission by calling each other to lead godly lives. And now we've been looking at the third rite of the liturgy of domestic church life, the Rite of Reaching Out, where we learn how to live out our royal mission of baptism by reigning with Christ, by serving with him. And we talked in general about service, and then in the second episode on this rite, we talked about last time how we can serve each other at home and why that's so important. In this one, the second practice in the Rite of Reaching Out involves how families can make a difference from a home. So again, we have a tendency to think of service as something we do for those people out there at special times when we make time for it. So the service we do at the urban mission, the service we do in the parish, the ministry work we do for the community. And those are all good and noble things. But that, is actually the least common expression of service. The reason I say that is because although those things are important, that's not what we spend most of our time doing, right? We spend most of our time working and living and with our families. And so how can we make a difference in the lives of others while still being a family at home? That's the second practice in the Rite of Reaching Out, because it reminds us that as domestic churches, we have to be mindful of others even as we're going about our day. So, for example, common practices in this second practice, the idea that domestic churches can make a difference while still being a family at home. Stewardship is a good example of this. So, are we remembering to take good care of our things, so with the intention of passing them on to other brothers and sisters in the Lord when we're done enjoying them? So our clothing, our children's toys, the things that we have in the house, are we taking good care of those things and being mindful of the fact that at some point we should be thinking about donating them so that other brothers and sisters in the Lord can use them? This is rooted in a principle of Catholic social teaching called the universal destination of goods. Now, the universal destination of goods relies on the idea that God is the owner of everything, and he lends his things to us so that we can use them for a time. And they are ours. This is not like in socialism where it belongs to everybody. These things that God owns, he gives them to us, and we are the stewards of those things. So we're not the absolute owners of those things, the Catechism tells us, but stewards of those gifts. It's our job to take good care of them so that they can be used for the purpose that God intends them to be used for. And then, when we're done enjoying them, passed on, if there's something to pass on, to others who can also benefit from God's goodness. And so, when we take care of our furniture and our clothing and our toys and our, things, with that eye, we're remembering that we, even when we're at home, are called to live for others. That in a sense, we're making the other people part of our family by keeping them in mind and remembering, that it's our job to help our children, for example, take good care of their things and to have this attitude, not where, I've known some families, for example, who, when birthdays or Christmases come, will say to their kids, okay, now it's time to clean out your closet and give half of your stuff away. And, if your family is good with that and your kids are okay with that, then that's fine. But it's not about forcing this on families. It's about being mindful of this need to be good stewards of your things, and having regular conversations where you're teaching and modeling your kids, not just lecturing them, but actually modeling how to take good care of things, where you're letting your kids come alongside of you as you take care of things, and you're showing them how to take care of their things so that they can pass them on. Are we teaching our kids how to do laundry? Are we teaching our kids how to clean up? And not just telling them to do it, but having them do it alongside of us so that they can learn that caretaking aspect of stewardship. Are we as fathers, say once a quarter, having a conversation where we're leading the family and saying, okay, it's time to gather our things together for the donation center. And we're taking lead in going around and collecting clothing that maybe doesn't fit anybody in the household anymore, but is in still good shape. Or those asking, are there certain toys that you don't play with anymore? Not forcing it, but, asking. Are we taking the lead in just really encouraging that kind of caretaking and charity that really drive the idea of stewardship? Another example of ways that families can make a difference while still being families at home is hospitality. People need godly places for fun and fellowship, and I think our homes should be those places. Our domestic churches are a sanctuary where we can celebrate the life that God has given us and invite others to celebrate with us by inviting people over for dinner, and inviting people over for a game night or for praise and worship time, inviting other people over to just be together. And it doesn't have to be religious in character. It's not necessarily we're getting together to pray the rosary. We're just getting together as families, but that's a ministry. Because again, if we've talked about through this series, if we think of ministry as any activity that shows the love of God to another person, then letting other people see how God's love is alive in our homes and being lived out in our relationships is a ministry. And giving families an opportunity to have godly fun and fellowship in our home is a ministry. I remember several years ago, a single mom called into More to Life, our radio program, and we were talking about this idea of home as a ministry, and she called up to share an experience that she had where, even as a single mom, she wanted to give her kids a safe place, and her kids' friends a safe place to have a New Year's Eve celebration. So she would, have all the kids' friends over to her house. They would have a sleepover. She would have games and activities. The next morning, she'd make a big pancake breakfast for everybody, and they loved it. And it was something they did every year. And then, she called up because she said, now my kids went to college and their friends went to college too. And I kind of thought, well, that was a little sad because I thought, well, that's going to be the end of this ritual. And when her kids came home from school, all of her kids' friends called up and said, hey, are you going to have that New Year's Eve party? We love coming over to your house every year. It was a beautiful thing that she was able to do for her kids and her kids' friends to make her home a warm and welcoming and godly and safe place. And they were really drawn to that. And that was a beautiful ministry. That story will always stay with me because for two reasons. One, because it shows how any family can make a difference in the lives of others just by being a warm, safe, loving, godly place. And secondly, that even families that might tend to look down on themselves because they're not the quote unquote perfect family can still make this difference and be a warm and safe and loving and godly place for others. So regardless of the construction of your particular family dynamic, know that God wants to use you to share his love with others and be that outpost of grace and light in the world. So those are two ways, stewardship and hospitality. Another way that we can make a difference even from home is service. And that involves looking around your neighborhood and seeing, are there little ways that I can help my neighbors? As a family, can we cut the neighbor's lawn? Can we shovel their walk? Can we make a meal for those neighbors who might be ill or having a new baby or those other kinds of things? How can we as a family keep our eyes open for ways that we can make a difference? And that even asking that question as a father over dinner, hey guys, have you noticed anything going on in the neighborhood? Anything that we could do to help our neighbors? A lot of times the answer might be no or nothing, but sometimes the answer might be something. And then you can make a plan to do that together. The point being, these practices under the Rite of Reaching Out are all ordered to remind us that service is part of Christian life. It's not an activity that we do when we make time for it to serve the people of the parish or the community. It's who we are. We are men and women for others, to use that popular Jesuit saying, that God created us. We're essentially, John Paul put it, we were created to make a gift of ourselves. And so at all times, whether we are just looking at each other in the home and saying, how can I serve you? How can I make your day easier or more pleasant? Mom, kids, brother, sister. Or we're talking about the difference we can make to our neighbors by being good stewards of the things God has given us so we can pass them on to other brothers and sisters in the Lord when we're done enjoying them. By being a hospitable household, the place that the neighborhood kids love to gather at, because we've always got the snacks or we've always got the things to do. The household where our friends like to gather for picnics and, cookouts and game nights and other things, because our home is a hospitable place. And the role that we as fathers play in making that happen. The fact that we are leading the conversation and helping our kids be mindful of their neighbors and look for ways that we can make a difference in the neighbors' lives. These are all beautiful things and ways that our domestic churches can make a real difference and build the kingdom of God without even leaving our front door. If you've got questions about living out any aspect of the liturgy of domestic church life, but especially this practice under the Rite of Reaching Out, I invite you to post those questions in the Questions and Coaching channel on the Catholic HOM app. We really love to have those discussions. And I love when other Catholic men and fathers are out there, just part of the community, sharing their experience, encouraging each other and sharing their ideas too. So if you've got questions about making this work or would like to share your thoughts about how your family lives out this practice in the Rite of Reaching Out, please share them in the Questions and Coaching section on the Catholic HOM app. God bless, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of Be-DAD-itudes. Hey man, Dr. Greg here, and you are watching the 38th episode of the Be-DAD-itudes podcast, where we're talking today about the very first practice in the Rite of Reaching Out, which is serving generously at home. Now, the Rite of Reaching Out, and I set this up in the last podcast. If you haven't checked out episode 37, you can learn more there. But the third rite of the liturgy of domestic church life is the Rite of Reaching Out. And this is, just to recap briefly, the way that we live out our royal mission of baptism. We reign with Christ by serving with Christ. And so the Rite of Reaching Out is the part of the liturgy of domestic church life, which enables families, common families, to become dynamic domestic churches. It is the part of the liturgy of domestic church life that helps us learn how to practice service as Christian disciples. And the family is the best place to learn that. We have a tendency to think that service is just something we do for other people at times we can schedule it in. But service is part of who we are as Christian persons. And so learning to have an ethos of service as opposed to just an ethic of service is important to live that at home. And I explained the difference between those two in the last podcast. So the first practice in the Rite of Reaching Out is families serving each other generously at home. And dads, you play an important role in making this happen. We have a tendency to love our comfort zones more than we love each other. And I've talked about this before in this Be-DAD-itudes series. This is kind of the number one problem that affects marriage and family life. Every single one of us loves our own comfort zones more than we love each other. So when our wife or our kids asks us to do something, our first reaction isn't, assuming that's not immoral or demeaning in some way, how can I help? Our first reaction is, regardless of whether that's immoral or demeaning, how do I feel about it? And if I don't feel like doing it, then I'm going to say no, because I just prefer not to. And when we do that, again, assuming the thing that's being asked for isn't against the commandments or demeaning in some way, then what we really have to assume is that anytime somebody asks us something in our family, especially because God has given us our wife and our children, anytime somebody in our family asks us to do something, it's an invitation from God to grow in ways that we wouldn't grow if we left to our own devices. So, God gave me my wife, not because he has a warped sense of humor, but because he knows that the needs he's placed on her heart give me a chance to grow in ways I need to grow to be the man he wants me to be. He gave me the kids that he gave me so that by listening to their needs and learning to attend to them in healthy, godly ways, I can grow in ways that I wouldn't if I didn't have these kids. And same is true the other way around. God gave me to my wife for the same reason. God gave me and my wife to our kids for the same reason, so that we could learn by growing together, attending to each other's needs. And so the first practice in this Rite of Reaching Out is all about families serving each other at home. Because I do run into situations, especially with men, we like to go out and conquer things. We like to go out and be thought well of in our community. So we're always saying yes to everybody in the parish or in the community to be doing these good things to serve the kingdom. And then we're neglecting our own domestic church. Right. And that's the effect of, kind of going out to build the second floor of our house while letting our basement fall apart. The foundation of the house, if the foundation of the house is cracked and wearing away, what are we doing building the second floor of the house? And that's very much the domestic church is the foundation of the church and society. That is the church's teaching on matters. And so if we aren't living out this Christian service and discipleship in our home, by really attending to each other's needs first, we are allowing the foundation of the church and society to fall apart on our watch. Now, let's just let that sink in. On the other hand, as Catholic men, as dads, living out our priesthood in our homes, celebrating this liturgy of domestic church life, we, by exemplifying this idea of Christian service, when our wife and our kids come to us with needs, we, instead of just saying, do I feel like doing it, saying, how can we figure out how to do this in a way that really works for all of us? That doesn't mean I have to say, I talk about this a lot too. It's not about just saying yes to everything all the time. It's about how we say it, right? It's the difference between negotiating the what versus the how and the when. So, what you want, I'm not going to call into question. What we are going to talk about is how and when, a plan by which we can identify the how and the when that we can meet the what. Because if we can do that, then we can be flexible enough for all of us to get our needs met. Me too. And still, find ways to be generous to each other. So one of the things that I really encourage you, as a dad to do in families to encourage this kind of service within the home is to lead a discussion every day. It doesn't have to be a big one, just maybe 3 to 5 minutes, right? And ideally, you want to make it part of your family prayer time. So you have your prayer time together. You're asking God to help you be the family He wants you to be. You're raising the different concerns that you might have about your family to God. You're all talking together about ways that God's asking you to grow, and you're praying for the grace to do that. And at the end of your prayer time, and if you're not sure how to do that kind of prayer time, check out the podcasts in Catholic Home. The Catholic Home podcast on the praise format, praise. It's a simple format for family prayer that really kind of covers all these bases. But say you have that prayer time, and then at the end of it, like I said, you have a 3-minute discussion on, so let's talk about one thing each of us can do to try to make each other's day a little easier or more pleasant. What's something how can we show up for each other today? And you invite just everybody in the family to offer different things. Sometimes people won't have anything, and that's okay. But just that act of leading the discussion where you're saying, let's all talk about some ways we can show up for each other today. What are some simple ways we can make each other's day a little easier or more pleasant? What are some ways that we could serve each other and take better care of each other? And that gives everybody a chance to say, well, I'm really dealing with this today and I need that from everybody. Or, I'm really having a hard time with this and I could really use that. Or, hey, what if we took some time for this thing? Can we make that happen and these other things? And by remembering to negotiate the how and the when and not argue about the what, you're able to listen to all of that and begin as a family to develop that plan that enables you to meet all the needs. And by doing that, you're also living out another practice, a practice in the first rite of Christian relationship, which is the first part of the liturgy of domestic church life that teaches us how to love and cherish each other as Christ loves and cherishes us, which is the third practice in that rite, which is prompt, generous, consistent, and cheerful attention to each other's needs. And how these things go together, by the way, is the prompt, generous, consistent, and cheerful attention to each other's needs kind of orders the attitude that we have to have toward each other's needs, the idea that I want to hear your needs and I want to respond generously to those needs. The first practice in the third rite of Christian relationship, this idea of families serving generously at home, talks about the actions that we're going to take. How do we live out action plans related to that desire to attend to each other's needs? So by being a dad who's really living out this first practice and leading it in your home, you are exercising that common priesthood of consecrating your home to Christ by being that Christian witness of service in the home and encouraging every member of the family, your wife and your kids, to exercise a similar attitude toward Christian service. And that's how we become more like Christ. We serve each other as He served us. And by facilitating that process of service, you become that servant leader. Right? The servant leader of the home doesn't dictate the family agenda. The servant leader facilitates the process by which plans are made to serve each other and God more completely. In that sense, you're like the chairman of the board, who doesn't dictate the board's agenda. You facilitate the process by which the board makes good decisions for the company. And in the same way, being the leader of the home doesn't mean you dictate your will and impose it on everybody else. It's you are the person who is in the privileged position to facilitate the process by which godly decisions are made in your house. So you lead the prayer, you facilitate the conversation, you ask the questions that prompt these healthy discussions about prayer and godly service in the home. And your family, your wife and your children come to respect you and see you as that leader that doesn't impose your will and act like some kind of part-time pagan deity in the household, but who really who is the person who facilitates the communion and the sense of togetherness and service and real love and warmth that everyone enjoys. And that's where that respect comes from and that obedience comes from, because they see that you are working for their good. And in a similar way, that we sing in that childhood vacation Bible school song, "Oh, how I love Jesus because He first loved me," we model that. Our children love us and respect us and obey us because they see that we first loved them. By listening to their needs, by drawing those needs out, by facilitating plans by which we can work together as a family to meet those needs and encourage our kids to learn how to do that for us as well and each other as well, so that we can be a family that is truly committed to serving in each other and then be an icon of the Trinity. You've probably heard me talk about this before if you've listened to other podcasts on this, but St. Bonaventure said that the Trinity is like a 3-bucket water wheel that is each member of the Trinity is constantly pouring itself out for the benefit of the other two. But it never runs dry because the other 2 members of the Trinity are filling that bucket back up again. Well, family life is supposed to be that way. We are all supposed to be, parents and children, giving 100% to the good of the family as best that each of us can at our particular age and stage. And that's obviously going to differ based on what age and stage we're at. But each of us is giving what we can to work for the good of the others. And so even though we're all giving our best, none of us ever becomes resentful or runs dry because we feel just as taken care of as we're working hard to take care of others. Now, that's an ideal. And obviously our families, because we're all broken and sinful people, don't always live up to that. But that's the goal. And by cultivating these kind of simple practices that I've suggested in this podcast, we, as Catholic dads, can facilitate that process that allow our families to function like an icon of the Trinity, where each member is pouring itself out to work for the good of the others while never running dry or becoming resentful because each other is caring for us as well. Thanks so much for tuning in to the the Be-DAD-itudes podcast. If you've got questions about how to make this happen in your marriage or family life, I hope that you'll post them on the Catholic Home app in the Questions and Coaching Home Builders channel, where we'll have these discussions all the time and you can get the expert coaching that you need to make it work for your family. Thanks so much for tuning in. See you next time.
Understanding the importance of a dad's role in the family, taking that very seriously. Dr. Greg Popcek giving us the Be-DAD-itudes. You want more on this episode or others you might have missed? Go to EWTN.com/podcast or subscribe to Be-DAD-itudes wherever you like to stream so you don't miss future episodes. I'm Ace McKay. When Catholics Coast to Coast returns, we're going to get a little MOMfidence as Lisa Popcek addresses a heartfelt question posed from one of her listeners during their show, More to Life, which you can hear on EWTN Radio, which they're asking, how can a mom be kind to herself throughout the day and not end up frustrated before it's over? So we're going to get the answer to that coming up with a little MOMfidence on this week's Catholics Coast to Coast.
If it's central to the faith, you can find it on EWTN Podcast Central, featuring the best of EWTN Radio, as well as faith-filled podcasts from our friends and affiliates across the nation, all in one place, all free. The destination for great Catholic audio programming is EWTN Podcast Central. It's like podcast heaven. Visit EWTN.com/radio/podcasts today.
I'm Lisa Popcek, and you're listening to MOMfidence, for moms at every age and every stage. Being a mom is wondrous and delightful, but also at times exhausting and overwhelming and confusing and frustrating. MOMfidence is a place for moms to come for encouragement, comfort, some new tools, and the confidence boost you need to be the mom you want to be. Hello and welcome back to MOMfidence. I am Lisa Popcek, and I'm so excited to do this particular podcast for you today because it was requested by a listener to my radio show, More to Life. Our listener had asked me specifically at the end of a call, how can a mom be kind to herself and not be frustrated at the end of the day? What a wonderful question. I think so many of us are so busy trying to please everyone else all day long. If you are full-time at home, you're still trying to please the children and make them happy and not have the temper tantrums and the meltdowns happen. You're trying to please your spouse if you have one and make sure that everything is just right in your home? And if somebody comes in to visit, will it look okay? And if you're also doing a from home paid job or an outside of the house job, then your time is limited at home to do all those other things, and you have to please the boss and make sure everything happens. It's a lot of focus on everybody and everything besides yourself. That's really hard. That can be really, really draining. So let's first completely validate that being a mom and even remotely thinking of being kind to yourself, that doesn't come easily. We actually have to be very intentional about doing that. And of course, when we try to be intentional about doing that, the first things that come to mind are very big things. I need 2 weeks away on a vacation all by myself. Not very likely to happen. I need to just get out with the girls one night a week, every single week. Maybe your kids are at the right age and stage for that, and you have reliable, safe childcare, and maybe you don't. Maybe you have those things planned, date night with hubby, girls' night out, time for yourself, and somebody gets sick, or somebody else has a bigger need, and it gets canceled over and over and over again. That is how life works. It's not just your family. It's really how life has a tendency to work. So what do? Do you just let the well run dry to the point where, you're just on the floor and you're exhausted and you're crying? Hopefully not. And if you have those moments, know that they will not be that way forever if you put some good practices into place and you have, hopefully, some folks that can come along and support you in getting what you need. Not all of us have that. I did not grow up in a household where my mom had that. My dad passed away when I was 5, and my mother's family lived very far away, and there was just nobody for her to count on. And she had to work and she had to raise her children, and it was really tough on her. So I am not talking to moms who live in some blissed out, everything's perfect kind of situation. And even for the moms who think they're close to that, every single mom knows that's not true, because you're still dealing with sleep deprivation and the influence of everybody's moods and the influence of your hormones. So to just reiterate, it can be really hard to be kind to yourself and not end up frustrated at the end of the day. So let's talk about a few things that we can put in place that may begin to ease some of that frustration at the end of the day. Okay, first thing, establish morning and evening routines. Ask yourself, what are 3 things that I absolutely have to do in the mornings to feel like a human being and get my day moving? And what are 3 things that I need to do in the evenings to be able to have a successful routine at night that allows us to all be able to get to sleep as best we can, depending on our ages and stages, and sets us up for a good day tomorrow? So for me, no matter what age my children were, I've just got this thing where I need to shower every single day. And I know for a lot of people, they're like, what? Are you out of your mind? I could not bear it, especially when my children were young. And, I'm nursing and there's, diapers, and I just needed to feel clean. And my husband was very supportive of that. And I would get up extra early. I would nurse the babies. I would go and take a shower while my husband took care of the babies. And then one of the things that we do that my sister had actually taught me, if it doesn't feel safe to you, don't do it. It just worked great for us. We never had any issues. My husband would bring me each kid one at a time, and I would shower that baby off very quickly and hand the baby back to my husband. And my husband would be in charge of diapering and dressing the baby. He had handed me the next baby. I would do the same thing. He would come back and get that baby and dry and diaper and change that baby. And that worked really well for us. We got into a routine of that where I was up, babies were nursed, and that went on, and I was clean to start my day. And that was everything to me. And I had, basic uniform that I wore when I was at home every day, sweater and jeans, or, sweatpants and a top, sweatshirt, whatever was going to work for my day the next day, depending on, was I going to be home all day? Did I have errands to run? But I knew what I was going to jump into, and it was ready to go. Making sure everybody had some kind of breakfast that worked for everybody and was easy. Weekends we would do, when we had the time, the fancier breakfasts, the pancakes and bacon or, scrambled eggs. I needed something pretty quick and easy every morning. And I figured out what that was based on what my kids would eat. And we were good to go. If I have those things in place every morning, even now, where my children are now grown and only one is left in the house, and that's only on college breaks now for the first time ever. If I can grab a shower, get myself dressed, get my coffee, get vitamins for my husband and I out and moving, because we take a lot of vitamins, I'm good. I can get my day moving from there. You have to ask yourself, what do I need to be able to get my morning going? And then the evening routine counterbalances that by, you say, after dinner, after everything is cleaned up, perhaps, while you're doing your evening, your clean up the dinner routine, which again, as we've talked about in many MOMfidences, and as part of what we teach on the Catholic Home app, if you're all doing dinner cleanup together, perhaps one of the things that's happening in there is the kids are packing their lunches for the next day if they need them to go off to school. You get all that done. And then what's the evening routine? What is it going to look like to give you a successful evening routine? Will there be time for some fun? I was just talking to one of our Catholic Home members today, and she was talking about having some time to be silly with her kids in the evening, but then how to make that not get out of hand. So is there time to be silly? Is there a way to help calm everybody down? Is there a way to make sure you're set up for the next day? So all the children have one, no more than two outfits picked out for the next day. So there's no fussing and fighting and where are my shoes? Where are my clothes for the next day getting out? Is there calm down time? Is there prayer time? Cuddled up in your bed and you cuddle, you have a family prayer time that's loving and conversational with God. Then maybe you read a chapter of a book, or if your children are still little, a couple of picture books, and then everybody's tucked in. If you have that flow, yes, there'll be times where the baby's screaming. Yes, there'll be times where something else happens. But if everybody knows what to expect and you begin putting a morning routine and an evening routine into place, after a few weeks, you're going to feel more centered and more in control. And that's going to be the first way of you being kind to yourself, so that you're not getting launched out of bed by the crying baby or the dirty diaper, and you're just hitting the ground trying to figure out what fire you put out next because everybody's saying, Mom, 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 Mom. And you're losing your mind by 15 minutes after you wake up. So for your own personal well-being, what are 3 things you need to get ready to be ready in the morning for your morning routine, and 3 things at the end of the night? And it can be 4 or it can be 5, but don't overburden yourself. Don't give yourself 25 things to do before you can go to bed at night, because that's not kind to yourself. You want to think of, what can I do to be kind to myself to start my day and end my day? Okay, let's think of the next thing that we can do to be kind to ourselves. As mom, each and every one of us has 10,000 thoughts going through our heads at any given moment. I don't even know how we keep it all together. And often we start dropping a ball here and there because our poor little brains cannot keep everything in our sleep-deprived minds and then making it happen. If you have not started to-do lists, this is the time. But let's talk about what those to-do lists should be like. It's a great idea. And I'm trying to think of the name of the book that this originally comes from. Something about getting things done. But this is a very pared down way of thinking of this. Grab a piece of paper, and whether you have a big fancy planner or you have just a sheet of printer paper, whatever that is, you want to be able to have this with you all the time. Fine if it's on your phone, but every time you have to stop and open your phone, you're going to get distracted. So I find it's much easier to keep a notebook or a piece of paper that I can literally fold up, put in the back of, put in my pocket or in my purse and have with me all the time. When I'm home, it's in my pocket. When I'm out, it's in my purse so that I can have it with me all the time till everything's checked off on it. And I do 3 to 4 boxes. So, fold your paper into 4s like we did in grade school or we help our children with. The first square is going to be things to buy. I cannot remember what everybody's favorite snack is. I cannot remember if I need my husband's toothpaste, which is different from my toothpaste. When I see that something needs to be purchased out of the house, it goes in the to buy section. And I just keep it running so that when I go out for my shopping day, which I try to do only once a week, it's there. And I can make it happen. And most of the time I'm looking at that list and then if I can do it that week, putting it on the pickup order so that I can just, go and pick all that up while I'm running all my other errands. The second square is going to be the discuss box on your piece of paper. This is anything you need to talk about with someone. You're writing down, I need to talk to the kids about what events are coming up this week. Make sure they're all still at the same times. Make sure we have who's going to drive whom to what written down. What clothes they need. Do they have all their sports gear? I have to ask about that. Is there anything extra they need? I do not need to find out that you need jazz shoes 2 days before your show. So let's discuss that ahead of time when I know there's a show coming up in a month. Talk to your spouse about whatever you need to talk about with the house, your schedule, finances. Have it written down on the list. It doesn't mean it has to be done all in one night, but you have it there so you can say, hey, honey, we need to have a chance to talk about such and such. Let's schedule that in. But as soon as you have these, I need to talk about things written down, your mind is calmer and you can make a plan with the people you need to discuss things with. So you're not trying to do it on the fly when everybody's exhausted and hungry and there's a million voices going on in the room. The other thing to keep a list about is things that you can do online. These can be done whenever you get a moment. One of the most wonderful ways to do those things is you're waiting in the pickup line. Oh, well, I can place that order while I'm on the pickup line. I can send that email that I need to send out that wasn't urgent, but I know I need to do it, so I have it on my online list. All of those things that you can do while you're waiting for the kids to come out of a rehearsal, or you're waiting, maybe you got home, but the baby is sound asleep in the car seat and you are not interrupting that nap to save the world. And you are going to sit in the car and you have that online list and you can get those things done. And guess what? It's perfectly fine if you just take a nap at the same time as the baby. That can be on the list too. You don't have to get everything done all the time. The other list that I want you to have, though, and you can keep this on a separate piece of paper if you want, because this is going to be the most important list that you do. I want you, if you don't do anything else, keep a got done list. This is something that my daughter Rachel and I came up with, over a decade ago. And it is the greatest thing in the world. Because as our caller was saying, she wanted to know, how can a mom be kind to herself and not be frustrated at the end of the day? We are frustrated at the end of the day because we are exhausted and we remember all the things that we didn't get done, and we remember all the times where we were dealing with melting down children, and as I am today, the leak in the basement, and all of the things that are just negative. If you keep a got done list, this is not the checking off the to-do list. This is the got done list. You keep a pen in your pocket and you keep this piece of paper in your pocket. And anytime you do anything, you write it down real quick. Doesn't have to be fancy handwriting. Just write it down. You make a dot. You write down what it was so you can see each point. I made breakfast. Write it down. I cleaned up breakfast. Write it down. I comforted the baby. Write it down. I nursed the baby. Write it down. Every single time you do. When you find out that you have nursed that baby 10 times in a day or more, think about how much work you got done, how many calories you burned, because that's exhausting, and it does. Not that I'm saying this is a way to get thin. I'm saying look how much work you put into it. Changed a diaper. You could find out at the end of the day with all your kids that you changed 12 diapers that day, or more, or less. It's there. I cleaned up the playroom with the children 3 times today, once today. I answered 6 emails. I had to answer the door. I had to call the plumber for this thing that I did not know I was going to have to do. I planned dinner. I got in my shopping order for the week. I took the kids to the doctor. Whatever those things are. I played with the children. We played Legos. We went for a walk. I pointed out the spring flowers and we talked about the colors of the spring flowers. You're not writing a book. You're making little tiny notes for yourself. At the end of every day, you are going to look at your today's got done list. I took a nap with the children. You know what? That's self-care. You got that done. When you do that, you are going to see the powerhouse that you are. Will you be thinking to yourself, oh, I didn't get a chance to vacuum. Oh, I didn't get a chance to fill in the blank. We drive ourselves crazy with that. We tear ourselves down for the things we didn't do or the things that felt like they weren't a victory. But if you write down, I worked through my toddler's tantrum today. I worked through 4 tantrums today. When we write these things down, suddenly we see we did a lot. I'm amazing. I'm a mom that handled all these things in a day. And if your spouse is foolish enough to ever come home and say, well, what did you do all day? Why is the house a mess? Hand them the list. Because we don't give ourselves credit for the things we think are interruptions in what would make us a perfect mother or a perfect person. We don't give ourselves credit for the diaper changes, the feedings, the snacks that we didn't expect to have to do. On and on and on. We need to do that. And when you can write down, I got this done, I got this done, I got this done. Don't wait till the end of the day. The minute you get done doing something, nurse the baby, change the diaper, defrosted the chicken, write it down, because you need to be able to give yourselves props at the end of the day and say, wait a minute. Look at everything I did to keep body and soul together for this family. Look at what a great mom I am. And if you get to the end of the day and you say, I've been doing this for a week and I didn't get enough chance to do fill in the blank. I haven't had a chance to play with the kids. I haven't gotten enough exercise. Well, maybe the next day you say, well, we're going to the park and we're going to walk there and I'm going to get that exercise and we're going to play in the park for half an hour and I'm going to walk back. Whatever those things are, it allows you to start being able to balance, because you'll start to see, hey, I'm covering all this stuff, but I'd like to fit in these things. Not shame on me for not getting these things done. I'd like to try to fit these things in so I can have more balance in my life. If you don't do anything else but start a got done list, you will begin to see how amazing you are. And that is really a way to be incredibly kind to yourself. The last thing I'm going to mention is you are the mom. And yes, you will have to deal with eruptions of, the kids had a fight. If you figured out how to solve that fight, make sure you write that down on your got done list. The baby's diaper explodes, on and on. You'll have those moments. But you're in charge of the larger routine of your day, the flow of your day. And I want you to give yourself moments of peace, either ones that you do your best to schedule or ones that you're just really craving in the middle of the day. So I know a mom of 13 children, and she homeschooled them. And every day after lunch, everyone knew their part of their routine was an hour of rest time. And mom would rest on the couch, and all the kids had to be in the living room, and they could either lay on a blanket on the floor, or they could be sitting and reading a book or coloring, but they had to be quiet, and they had to give mom an hour of quiet. And they knew that was part of their routine. And for a very long time, this particular woman was blessed because her husband was a university professor, and he would come home during that lunch break when they had tiny children and help facilitate that 1 hour for her every single day. And then he'd, drive back to the university and he'd do his classes and his office hours. Most of us don't have that kind of blessing. But if we begin to schedule in some kind of quiet time, no devices, no noises, just everybody has to do something quiet. If your children are really tiny, you're not going to get a whole hour unless you get them to sleep, but you might get 10, 15 minutes while they're drawing or playing with, some kind of totally safe clay, if they're old enough to do that, 3 and up. But something. They can be cuddled up next to you on the couch, but something that says, mom needs some peace and quiet. Things getting out of control in the middle of the day, mom needs a cup of tea. So we're all going to sit down and we're all going to have some quiet time. I'm going to have a cup of tea. You guys can have your tea. It's mostly milk or water or whatever, but you all have that together. And maybe mom's reading a nice book to the whole family. So the kids have to be quiet to listen. And they have this special time with you, but it's giving you a time to lower your emotional temperature and feel connected to yourself and to the children. As I said, I have another neighbor, 8 kids, amazing woman, and every single day for all the years we've lived in the same neighborhood together, she would go out with all 8 of her children and walk. Every single day I would see her walk past my house with all the children. And I said to her once, how do you do this? Like in the rain, in the snow, in the sun, in the heat. She's like, if I don't get them all out of the house and I don't get some exercise and fresh air and they don't get to burn off some of this energy, I will lose my mind. So no matter what's going on, unless it's lightning outside, we get outside to take that walk every single day. And if you go around where our neighborhood is, it's about a mile. So sometimes she would do a mile with the kids. Often it was her pushing one stroller and the oldest kid pushing another stroller, and all the kids were just walking along together. But that was how she scheduled some self-care into her life. We have to realize we have more control than we think. And it is okay to say, we're having quiet time or we're having recess. Even if you're not a homeschooler, if you're home with children, some kind of recess outside is fine to do. If preschools and daycares can schedule in nap times, outdoor times, we as moms can do that too. And if we have this morning routine and this evening routine where we know we're getting things done that set us up for a good day today and a good day the next day, we'll be much more likely to be able to give ourselves that break and say, I am scheduling some kindness time, or I'm stopping the whole day and we're having some kindness time where mom gets some kindness to herself and everybody else is going to gear down and we're going to reset, because that's what I need right now. Because you really are in charge of the rhythm of your day. Again, and I mentioned this in the last podcast, this does not mean setting a timer and we play blocks for 45 minutes, timer rings, we put in laundry. We can try to do that, but very often we're going to be in the middle of the exploding diaper or the crying child or not wanting to disturb the napping child or not wanting to stop the fun. So if we just know when I get to the end of this section, this is the next kind of thing that I want to do.
How can a mom be kind to herself? Thanks to Lisa Popcek, getting some MOMfidence in that this week. If you want more from this podcast or others you might have missed, either subscribe where you like to stream or simply go to EWTN.com/podcast so that way you don't miss what's to come, and you can share it with your friends as well. I'm Ace McKay, bugging out and going home. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Remember to let God define who you are, and I'll see you again with Catholics Coast to Coast.